joining us today. We have Scott Zakheim with us here from Landmark Ventures. He's the general partner, but specifically he's over their digital tech practice, and digital is at the top of everyone's mind right now, Scott. So let's get right into it, because when you think of sort of that intermediation of technology, specifically you as a digital tech matchmaker, where does that balance kind of lie for businesses when it comes to that convex or that middle point, when they look to kind of roadmap out the next 12 months in these uncertain times?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on today. And it is an interesting time. And as an intermediary, we're really well positioned. So just to take a step back and look at our model, we work with a whole portfolio of digital tech companies, and ultimately we help them grow. And we do it by building up great relationships with digital marketing leaders across the enterprise. That includes brands, CPG, retail, travel, hospitality, sports, media, entertainment. You name the vertical, we want to engage with their digital leaders and learn about how they are smartly engaging consumers. And so for us, at this juncture, our model works really well. We are almost taking advantage of the fact that we can be a benign entry point into the enterprise, leverage the fact that leaders have time right now to talk. Folks have some bandwidth, no travel, everyone's at home. We can get on the phone, talk to digital marketing leaders, take the time to learn about what they're focused on, how they're approaching the new normal, what they're road mapping for once we get out of the quarantine. And with that, we can position our tech partners really well. So we try to fit our partners in the conversation as a matchmaker. All we try to do is align the challenges that digital leaders face with solutions within our ecosystem and bring the two sides together. And today, in the climate that we're dealing with, direct sales are almost taboo and frowned upon. Folks aren't reaching out to brands to sell technology indirectly. But the fact that we can come in as an intermediary, as a matchmaker, get on the phone in a pretty benign way and chat with the digital leader and then position our tech secondarily works really well. And we've had success in positioning our tech partners and getting them in front of decision makers, even in this environment.
Well, I mean, that's really good to know, because I think a lot of companies out there, Scott, are really basically saying we feel like everything's at a standstill. I know you've probably been on lots of calls and people are saying, we're trying to plan, we're trying to figure it out, but we don't really know what our budget is going to be. I think this is where technology um, plays an even bigger role in terms of
Sure.
that outward planning. And what you're doing at Landmark, as you reference, really sits squarely at the center of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in this environment. Brands, specifically those in digital, are looking for ways to automate, ways to create efficiency, whether it's from a human resources perspective, from a cost perspective, from a customer engagement perspective. Anything that can allow them to cut costs and save and engage the customer in a more effective and automated way, they're going to look at. So technologies do have a part in all this. And the clients that we work with, for the most part, whether it's AI based or natural language processing based, they all have different ways to create those efficiencies to allow brands to work with maybe less headcount to save costs. And so we can position them, and a lot of them are really flourishing in this moment.
Yeah, I love that you brought up AI, which actually I think we can have an entire show dedicated to AI, to what brands and companies are doing around that, especially throughout this pandemic and beyond. But sticking right now with just this kind of intermediation of technology, let's look at digital media and e-commerce. Right now, you see people are definitely engaging more with e-commerce and digital media, which is kind of at the forefront as retail goes, especially in the
Sure.
e-commerce space and
Yeah.
digital media. But right now, I mean, when everyone's stuck inside, this is literally all they have to go to. How are brands, or what should brands be doing to better leverage that?
Well, it's complicated. I think yes, folks are at home, they're captive customers, they're engaged. But I think that at an economic level, the everyday consumer is still trying to tighten their belt. A lot of folks are furloughed, a lot of people are laid off. And so, although the desire is to get online and spend because you have the time to do it, Some folks just don't have the means. I was talking to an e-commerce leader today, someone who runs e-commerce for a fairly well-known global retailer, and they've had ebbs and flows. I think a lot of checks did come in the last 10 days from the stimulus, so they saw a
Mhm.
spike in their e-commerce sales because people felt like they had some cash to play with. But it isn't as simple as, hey, they're home, so they're going to spend. I think a lot of people are tightening their belts. There's a general lack of consumer confidence. So even though folks can spend at brick and mortar, doesn't mean that they're home spending on e-commerce websites. But that said, I think the companies I speak to that are e-commerce native, that are driving e-commerce P&Ls, they are doing okay. They are staying afloat. They are managing, and ultimately they're adapting. They've had to change messaging. They've had to update websites. They've had to almost portray empathy. You can't just be a brand that sells right now. You have to be a brand that shows empathy, that understands where the consumer is coming from, that has to address the current situation. If you're going to be tone deaf as a brand, then you're not going to sell. And so, brands that are embracing community engagement, that are doing cause marketing right now, they're the ones that are seeing traction, are creating goodwill amongst their stakeholders that they'll take well beyond COVID, and they'll remember, hey, this brand did this during COVID. I like the way that they treated me. I like the way they engaged me. I'm going to stick with them for the long run.
Right, because I mean, we do know that at some point, we as a global community will get past this. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of brands and companies that are really showcasing their empathy around what's going on. Because a lot of people's situation, it isn't very great right now. But bringing it back to the tech for a second, there are out there though some tech supply chains, right, that have been struggling. If it's due to closed down manufacturing plants, if it's and that's taken some stuff offline, the people that operate
Sure.
the machinery, that's at a super sort of manufacturing level. But there have been some issues, right, across the tech supply chain. If you're a company that has been experiencing that on top of, right, what else is going on around the pandemic, when you talk to Landmark Ventures, what is kind of your advice? What is it that you tell them to keep them optimistic and kind of hopeful during this time?
Well, again, there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think that, yeah, to your point, especially I speak to marketing leaders and digital marketing leaders. A lot of their budgets have been set aside or pushed towards supply chain operations for their companies. They don't need some big brands, some big retailers. Their products are flying off the shelves. They just need to focus on supply chain and make sure that the supply can keep up with the demand. On the flip side, my counterparts that run our traditional IT practice that liaise with enterprise CIOs and CTOs are my counterpart Isaac Brown, who runs our IoT practice focused on supply chain efficiencies and using things like you know smart technologies to keep supply chains rolling even in times like this. They're busy. Their partners are busy. There's a lot of, as I said, efficiencies that can be created in the supply chain using technology. So, although that's not my domain, I know a lot of budget, a lot of time across the enterprise is being put towards supply chain operations to make sure that the wheels continue to turn, so that supply can keep up with crazy consumer demand. Everybody wants their toilet paper. Everyone wants their paper towels.
Yeah, they definitely do. And a lot of companies are struggling one way or another, even if you are seeing, ramped up kind of sales, you're still stressed, right? Because you need people to service all those orders, as you mentioned, the supply and demand. All right, well, I think that this was a very great, poignant conversation because Landmark really does work with so many of the world's biggest clients. These are things that you guys are dealing with on a daily basis. So who better to talk about what these companies are kind of seeing and what they should perhaps be planning to do in the future than you, Scott. So thanks so much.
I appreciate you having me on.